So what's the biggest failure? The airlines or Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger? Both getting very bad press today, and a lot of it has to do with money. Sounds like a job for Varney and Company. And here is the company. Evan Newmark, Chris Cotter, Andrea Tantaros, and Nicole Petalides at the New York Stock Exchange watching the markets for us. Now, the news media is looking to slam the door on Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger as he leaves office. Just listen to some of the harsh words coming from the LA Times. But his most glaring and critical failure was not to tear up the credit cards, end the crazy deficit spending, and live within our means, as he reportedly vowed. And then yesterday we had Mike Reagan on, and he had this to say. Listen, LA Times also saying that the state would have been better off if they would have stuck with Gray Davis. Now that it's all said and done, the governor was an absolute bust. What do you think about the article?
Well, I think Schwarzenegger would have been better off had Gray Davis remained as governor of the state of California.
So let's get some defense from the Schwarzenegger's team. Joining the company from Sacramento is Aaron McLear, press secretary extraordinaire for Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Aaron, it feels like the governor is leaving office as a political girly man right now. I hate to say it, but that's what it feels like.
That's just mean, man. I mean, no, not at all. You know, the column that you cite is from George Skelton, who's, been covering Sacramento since Governor Pat Brown was in office, the governor-elect's father. So, he's one of the smartest, most keen observers of what's going on here, but he's also one of the most vocal advocates for tax increases. And we just simply disagree with him. We're not going to increase taxes. He thinks that when we have a deficit, we should do that. And it's simply we disagree. I think the governor has put in place a number of reforms that are going to help the next governor govern much more successfully than we could have.
Aaron, though, I think you would have to be the first to admit, considering how the governor was swept into office and the promises to blow up bureaucracy and the things that he said he was going to do, the past 7 years have been somewhat of a disappointment.
I totally disagree. People talk about blowing up the boxes like he promised. He came in, he realized that the boxes weren't getting rid of the Board of Cosmetology or some commission that doesn't cost us anything. The biggest box is the system itself. The legislature is the biggest box. And, the reforms he put in place, open primaries and redistricting that are going to get rid of the extremists in Sacramento and elect more centrist, more pragmatic leaders here, that's the biggest box of all, changing the system with pension reform, budget reform, political reform. All those things that were ignored for so long, that's the biggest box of all. He absolutely blew up the box.
Let me, Aaron, it's Evan Newmark. Let me ask you a question. Is California actually governable? I mean, does it matter who's actually governor right now, or is the state itself fundamentally broken?
That's a smart question. A lot of people are asking the same thing out here. I think the governor, he took every approach possible. If something didn't work, he tried a different approach. And some have criticized him for that. I think that's the pragmatic way to go about things. And he's proven that California's system of government is broken. And that's why we're so happy the last couple of years, we've been able to get a lot of these reforms that I just mentioned to you. And that's really going to help shake up the system and help the next governor govern more effectively. As always said, the things that he did are not going to help him. It's not a selfish thing. He's always looked, taken the long view, looked into the future, and these reforms are going to have a huge impact down the road.
What about, though, the legitimate beef about the borrowing? The first year in office, the governor borrows $15 billion, borrow another $37 billion, you're $28 billion in debt. He's even pressing for borrowing another $10 billion by 2012 for water conservation. What happened there? That seems like a real legitimate critique of the governor and a major issue in America these days.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with you at all. And there's a couple things I would point out. First of all, you mentioned that we're in deficit. 39 states are in deficit. Most of the world is in deficit.
But
Aaron,
come on now, Aaron. Let's talk though specifically though about the governor in California because that's
absolutely
not a good way.
Well, I just want to make sure you get that point. Oftentimes I come on here and it sounds like California's the only place in trouble. That's not the case. But to answer your question, you're right. We've done a lot of borrowing, but most of that borrowing has been investment. And you mentioned the water bonds. That's not borrowing to pay your groceries. That's investing in the future. A lot of the infrastructure bonds that were passed in 2006, about $40 billion, was to rebuild an infrastructure that hasn't been updated since Pat Brown was in office back in the 50s. So, a lot of what we've done is not borrowing just to get by. Most of the borrowing we've done is either paying off the debt from the previous administration or investing in our future infrastructure.
Aaron, buddy, are you partaking in the medical marijuana out there in California? I think anybody would look at that state and say Governor Schwarzenegger really dropped the ball. State-by-state rankings, California is among the lowest in business climates. There's nowhere that it's harder to start a business. What went wrong?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, the governor actually has taken a lot of flack here for defending businesses, for putting in place tax credits for job creation. You know, he took a lot of flack from the left for backing the chamber. If you talk to any of the business community out here, they're going to say, I'm very thankful the governor was in office defending us the last few years. You know, we put in place a lot of these tax credits to help businesses grow. The green tech sector here is growing faster than any other sector in California and faster than anywhere in the country. So we're still doing a lot to create jobs and protect businesses out here. And the governor has done a lot to make sure that's the case.
But Aaron, you know, you just talked about the left. It seems like Arnold Schwarzenegger did succumb to the left. His greatest legacy probably will be as a global warming enthusiast, as an environmental activist, but that's not what the people needed or wanted. And to Andrea's point, California is no longer the sunshine state. It's no longer the state people think about. 1.3 million people, Americans, left California in the last 10 years.
Well, look, you're right. His environmental credentials are unquestionable. You say that's not what the people wanted. Well, that's not the case in California. Actually, in California, people did want those things. They continue to. You look at any poll, and people actually still like what the governor's done on the environment. So I think that's certainly something he's proud of. But also, you know, the political reforms I mentioned are another thing he's quite proud of. And I think that's what a lot of observers now are saying is going to be his lasting legacy. The environmental reforms, the infrastructure investment, and the political reforms are going to have more pragmatic people here in Sacramento to make sure we can fix our problems.
All right, Aaron. Well, unfortunately, well, hold on.
I'll make a kind of a point, kind of a question. But Aaron, isn't that part of the problem? The fact that we saw with the election this past fall was that California voters voted against making certain changes when it comes to the budgetary process and whatnot. That really a lot of people look at it and say, hey, these need to be done. So maybe the people don't get it there in California.
Well, you raise a great point. You know, one of the difficult things about here is the initiative process, and you know, the people when they're polled, they say we don't want to increase taxes, but we also don't want to cut any programs. I think it's probably the same case across the country, and we've certainly been you know, strapped down a little bit by some of the initiatives that have passed. But again, the governor has put in place a lot of reform, loosen up the reins a little bit to make a more pragmatic, sensible Sacramento. And I think again, in the future, governors are going to look back and say, thank you, Governor Schwarzenegger, for shaking up the system, not having the courage to do that.
Aaron, thanks very much. Listen, I know that Arnold had a tough time against a tough system and an electorate who really probably aren't sure what they want. California is probably going to be a great place to visit, like Yosemite Park. Now, I'm just joking with you, but the fact of the matter is, it is sort of heartbreaking what's happened in California, at least from an economic angle. And you guys probably did the best you could. I appreciate your time this morning. You're a great friend to the show, and we'll see you again soon.
Happy New Year to you, Josh, and Stuart, and everybody else there at Fox Business.
You got it, buddy.